tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Renee Barnett, your host. I'm going to get right into it because I'm excited about tonight's guest and our subject matter. We have a guest that a lot of you guys are already familiar with because she is a good friend of NightVision, and she's one of my best and dearest friends and fellow researcher. And we've done lots of fun projects together, led some tours to Southwest France and the UK and different places. And we constantly have these really interesting telephone conversations because we're on opposite coasts of the United States. I think a lot of you already know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about author and intuitive Gloria Amendola. Hey, Gloria.
Hey, Renee. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. It's been a crazy week. I know it has for you too. It's just been wild. I mean, it's probably same thing for everybody, but gosh, it just seems like things are just coming at us so fast. And I know you lost a dear one this week, as did I. So we've got that to contend with, but we're going to do our best and to share some good and fun information because laughter is the best medicine. And also, it's always good to learn something. And I learned some stuff today that I'm excited to talk about. I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks after all. But folks, tonight we are actually venturing in the world of 3D radio. And we are covering the ground of dreams, disclosure, and destiny. We're going to start out with dreams. We're going to talk about what they mean and, all kinds of things, the nature of dreams. The second half hour, we'll be talking about disclosure. And what is disclosure going to look like? Is disclosure already happening? Is disclosure going to be some kind of announcement? Or is it going to happen more with just new discoveries coming down the pike from different people from around the world? And the third and final subject, and not last but not least, is destiny. Our destiny as humans and what it means to be human. And if indeed we have been and are being visited by beings from other dimensions, other planets, other realms, then what is it about us that interests them? And what do we have in common with them? So we're going to get into all that. But Gloria, we're going to talk about dreams to start with. And in preparing for the show tonight, I was reading some various articles on dreams. And of course, every time I think about dream symbolism and, dream analysis and that sort of thing, I always think about Carl Jung. I'm sorry to say I don't know as much about Carl Jung as I probably should and probably will know because I learned some new things today. And he talked about, obviously the collective unconscious. But he did say something about dreams, and he felt like that was the way that our minds or that we actually integrate our conscious and unconscious lives, and that he called that the process of individuation. And it means sort of reconciling ourselves, our unconscious with our conscious. What is that? What do you agree with that? I mean, that sounds like a very, very good definition to me of the process that he talks about, individuation, reconciling our conscious with our unconscious. And we do that in dreams, he says.
Well, I agree with that in the regard that I believe that the dream time is quantum. So I believe past, present, and future are all at play at once. So a reconciliation probably could happen there much more easily, or we can close the gap between separation, because in that space of the dream time, all aspects are at play simultaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking earlier in the week about dreams and significant dreams. And of course, we've been talking of late quite a bit about our, what it means to be a human being, our origins, possible genetic links with, visitors from other places. Everyone's heard the Sitchin material and others talking about, the Anunnaki coming here and intermingling with our race. But we were also talking about dreams. And I know you had a very strange dream that you wanted to share, because I was sharing with you a dream I had sort of in that realm of ETs and UFOs, which I'll tell in a minute, but I'd like to hear about yours.
All right, I'd like to lay just a little bit of groundwork into my work in the dream time to make the first dream that I'm going to share a little bit more understandable to the listening audience. I believe there are dreams that when we go to sleep, we're just kind of processing our day, our week, what's going on in our life, and those feel to me a certain way. And I've had, 4 separate trainings that I've done in dream levels of teaching and shamanic understanding and soul recovery and things like that. So I take this very seriously. It's really a deep passion of mine. And we learned in the beginning stages how we have dreams of the future in a dream. You can dream something that is going to happen in the future in waking reality, but in dream time and sleeping, it happens again in that quantum field, and then we pull it out as we wake up and we decide what we're going to do with that information. There's also healing dreams where you might dream of a health situation and different outcomes of how to address a health situation that you might be dealing with. So there's a transpersonal dreams, and I've had them where people that I know who've crossed over come to me in the dream time, and it's not just dreaming about them, but it's actually being able to connect with them more easily in the dream time. And usually that transpersonal dream by the way you feel when you wake up. You feel the glow of having connected with someone that if it's someone you really cared about, you have that glow, that feeling. So it really transcends the notion of just dreaming about that person, but actually having contact with that person. So for me, I think when I was studying dreams and training and all that, we were looking at 7 levels of the dream time. And so it really has great depth, like the movie Inception, right? That had great depth and the possibility of dreams. So I wanted to set that stage because the first dream I'm going to share is really kind of weird. And I mean, I've known you for a lot of years, Renee, and I remember telling you this dream because my beloved pit bull Rocky was still alive, and that was 2010. So that's 7 years ago. I had that dream about the ETs. And you're one of the first people I called because you understand that world more than I do. You've had more exposure to it than me. So I remember calling you.
Are you saying I'm a little spacey? Are you trying to say I'm a little
Not at all. I'm saying you understand the ufology world much better than me. It just wasn't
because of the work that I've done in the past on UFO Magazine and on some of the programs that I've done. Yeah, I have been quite involved in that world, and I do remember you calling me. It blows my mind that you say it was 2010 because it just seems. First of all, it seems like good old Rocky was just here yesterday, and
I know.
It's just amazing how time flies like that. But, please refresh my memory and share it with the listeners on about that dream because it was pretty wild, especially hearing it from you at that time. Because at that time, I had, left the field of ufology pretty much and was really, really steeped in all this, I guess you might call it Da Vinci Code-esque, Holy Grail, Holy Bloodline type research as you were. So it was like I didn't want to really hear about ETs at that time.
Right.
And
right.
It's only been in the past few years or so that both of us have had to admit to each other that no matter how we have tried to resist it, our research keeps sort of leading us back down that path again. And
I know. Remember when we both got to that point, we were so pissed off that all the work we did, right? It led us full circle to that in very different ways, and there we were having to grapple with that aspect of reality, right?
Yep. It's so
here's the dream I'd like to share with the listening audience. And again, I'm a big believer in the dream time and the absolute capacities that we're just beginning to understand that we're tapping into every night when we lay our head on the pillow and go to sleep and fall asleep and start dreaming. So this one was called and I said that because what I wanted to say is that I spontaneously remote view in the dream time because that's where I'm comfortable doing it. So I've really gotten to know very different levels of the dream time. So when I had that dream when bless his soul, Rocky was still alive, I called it Grays in the Field and Teenage Ovaries. And what happened was I was traveling about in my dream time, so I didn't really feel like I was dreaming. I felt like I was traveling, like I was astral projecting, like I was roaming around the universe, if you will, like a guardian of the galaxy, right? And I come upon this field, and I know in my sense that it's somewhere in the Midwest. It's secluded, it's dark, it's nighttime, and there's a clearing in the field. And as I look to the clearing, I see this dome, this small dome, and I see light. So I know that it's dark and I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I see light. So I approach the light. And as I approach the light in this experience, I go around this walkway in the dome is circular. And there's something in the middle, but I can't quite make out what it is. So I start to walk around, and all of a sudden, holographic projections come at me like I'm in a mall in America, like a shopping mall. But I'm really in this pod, so there's some sort of projected reality going on. But what I know is real in the dream is that there's these pods that have light in them somehow from underneath, and these teenage girls are unconsciously climbing into the pod, almost like a tanning bed, if you will. But it's not a tanning bed. And they climb into it, and when they get into it, the grays, the gray alien, the gray species, the small grays that we've seen so much of, start tweaking something in these young girls in their ovaries. And I get incensed when I see that in this experience in the dream time because I know the girls aren't aware of it. So this is being done without their consent. And that really angers me in the dream. So all of a sudden, the ETs telepathically tell me to get out of there. And I say no. I get really defiant because these girls don't know what's happening to them. So they literally pull me out, not to hurt me, but just to remove me from this pod, this dome, and they put a chair in the middle of this field a good 100 feet away, if not more, and they look at me and they point like, sit down, and I defiantly say no, and I run back to the pod, to the dome, as if I'm going to save these teenage girls, and they pull me back again and point to me to sit in the chair. And again, I say no, I'm defiant. And I go up to the structure again. And as I do, they're bombarding these teenage girls with light. And I know when they're doing that, they're creating amnesia. So they don't have a memory of what's just been done to them. And I start screaming because the light is creating that amnesia. And I wake up. And so when I wake up in my home, I'm drenched with sweat. My heart is racing, and my dog Rocky was so concerned for me. He started barking like crazy. It was about 3 a.m, and for about a half hour, we went all around the house looking to see what energies could be around us, because we knew in that dream that it wasn't a dream, but that I had stumbled upon something real happening in our world.
So do you think that in our dreams, we can actually, sort of, transverse other dimensions and that sort of thing? Like, I know we've talked about some other dreams that both of us have had. One in particular I was thinking of when you dreamt that you were, we were in Rennes le Chateau, or either you dreamt that you were there. But anyway, you had an experience with your mother who's passed. And it was quite clear and vibrant and really strong. And I think you said it was the first time that you had been able to connect with your mother like that since she had passed. So do you feel that she was coming through to your dimension, or you were going to hers, or you were meeting some neutral place? Do you think that there's a place where we can sort of go to the veil and be face to face with each other? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, one of the things that so fascinates me, we always talk about Rennes le Chateau, is that I believed very strongly after that dream that you remembered, where my mom is able to come through the energies there. It's like a heaven's gate, if you will. So I was staying in the Bird's Nest, Ingrid's old apartment, which butts up right against the churchyard there, and the Invisible Garden, and the Church of Mary Magdalene. And in that space, when I went to sleep, my mom comes to me, and she's such a young soul that she has a hard time coming through. I bring people through from other levels of reality all the time in the work I do as an intuitive and a medium. But my own mother, it was just she just doesn't have the ability, but she does in certain places, and Rennes le Chateau was one of them. So when we met, we were able to hug and, really exchange, words and how much we've missed each other. And as I moved along in that area of Rennes that you know so well, I got so excited. So I said to my mom in the dream time, come on, Mom, I want to show you the Villa Bethany. I want to show you the Tour Magdala. And she went as far as she could. And she says, I can't go any further. And so in the process of that dream, my mother showed me where the portal energies were in Rennes le Chateau, where heaven meets earth, where you have that ability to connect. And I was so moved by it that when I woke up, I started crying. And not only did I cry, I put a jacket on over my pajamas. I didn't care who was in the village. And I walked right over to the grotto, Saunier's grotto, and I completely sketched out, while it was fresh in my mind, where she told me she could coalesce her spirit and where she couldn't move from the boundary of that. And that was no ordinary dream.
Well, it's interesting because I noticed you said a gateway to heaven. And of course, let me remind you and others that was very near where, you had that experience of meeting up with your mother, was very near, as you said, to the church. And above the doorway at the church, there's a Latin phrase. It's like terribilis locus est, or terribilis est locus est. And it means this place is terrible. And the remainder of that comes from a Bible verse about the Jacob's ladder story, where he climbed the stairway to heaven, and in his dream. And the rest of that phrase is this place is terrible, and it is the gateway to heaven.
Yes.
That's the end of that verse. So, I think somebody, probably, whoever put that up, I don't know if that was something that Sonia added or that was always there. Maybe but whoever put that there, I think, knew about the specialness of that place, just like the old mayor told us that, that the real secret are the energies here, the telluric energies. But I think that's all a part of it. All a part of it being a gateway. Yeah. Yeah. Really, really interesting. But the dream about the grays in the field and the teenage ovaries, what a title. What a title. But, it's similar to other dreams that I've heard from people. And I shared with you that, and I don't know if many people know this, but I was one of the original founders of Close Encounter Research Organization, which still exists under the leadership of Yvonne Smith, who's a hypnotherapist. And it's called Close Encounters Research Organization, or CERO. And Yvonne's, licensed hypnotherapist, and I actually took hypnotherapy training myself in order to research the phenomenon that was really just becoming prominent in the public eye at that time. It was back in the 80s of alien abduction and alien contact. And I later ended up not really using the hypnosis part, just did more straight research. But one of the things that I asked everyone that came through there, and so it was primarily people who had or felt that they had some kind of alien experience, mostly an abduction, because that's sort of what it was for. It was sort of a support group and a research group. And so my thing was, I asked everyone that came in, hey, do you have an end of the world dream? And that's all I would ask. And it was amazing how similar so many people's dreams were. And the reason I started asking that question was because I had a dream my whole life long, recurring, that I called my end of the world dream. And in it, every time I would be outside, and it would usually be nighttime. But in any case, the sky was just full of spaceships, of armada of spaceships just coming in different formations and coming. And I think I told you, Gloria, that on some of them, they were actually projecting images on the sides, like cartoons. And I remember thinking in the dream that, oh, this is their way of trying to make us not afraid. They're showing, Bugs Bunny or, some known cartoon to us, like this is a friendly sign. And in my dream, which I kept calling the end of the world dream, I realized that it wasn't the end of the world, just the end of the world as we know it. And so I asked people that, and, one woman said, oh, I was standing, I have this dream I have over and over again. I'm standing at the ocean, and I look up, and there's just these spaceships just filling the sky and just coming. And you wouldn't believe how many times that happened, that people had that dream. And I never gave them any hints ahead of time that it had anything to do with the sky full of ships. Of course, they were there for UFO studies, so that might have been a little bit of a prompt. But I wonder how many people out there have had a similar dream or another dream that they call their end of the world dream, and what that looked like to them. Do you have one?
That's so interesting about other people having them. There again, we get back to that idea of the collective consciousness. I wonder if your dream is a past dream, or something that will happen, or something that's happened, and
maybe another reality.
Let me say it this way, because this is a new notion that I've been thinking of. So a lot of times in the work I've done with people that have a lot of the Essene memories, the memories of the Essene community that was around before and during the time of Jesus and after, a lot of people gravitate towards me, and they have these memories, and it's just fascinating. And it reminds me of like Dolores Cannon and Jesus and the Essenes, or even Stuart Wilson and Joanna Prentice, Children of the Light. It's just amazing how it's happening. So I can connect that to the past. And I could say, okay, so everybody has this memory, and they have little variances here and there, but basically it's the same memories. But and what I learned in soul recovery training is that if you have a recurring dream like that, most times it's a dream of the past, and it's been traumatic. And as a result, a part of you goes and gets stuck in that timeline, and in that memory. And in soul recovery and soul retrieval, you bring it back, and you integrate it back into who you are. But you have to wonder with your dream, I'm going to run this by you, see what you think. It could be something of the future. It could be something of, something to come, or something I've been considering lately. Is it that it did happen in the past, and those who are trying to control our reality or simulate our reality want us to have that remembrance again so that they can perpetuate a cycle?
Well, that's wild.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the collective unconscious, and I said earlier in the show that I learned something today, and that's what it was about. It was about the collective unconscious, and I was able to disavow myself of a misconception about it today. And it's amazing, how you kind of think one way, or you think you know something, and then you realize that it's really another way, and you think, oh my God, I've been looking at it the wrong way all this time. Well, I don't know if you remember, but earlier in the week, we were having a conversation in which Akashic records came up. And I said, oh, well, to me, it's kind of like the collective unconscious. It's something we can, and you go, well, it's something different. And you went on to explain sort of, what you thought the Akashic record was. Well, today, when I was getting ready for the show, of course, the collective unconscious comes again from our good friend Carl Jung, the late great Carl Jung. And what I realized, it said that a lot of people, it said the headline of the article was something like, "The collective unconscious is not a psychic soup." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to see what that says. And basically, it said a lot of people are under the misconception that the collective unconscious is some sort of like all the knowledge that's ever been and ever will be and ever was all out there for the grabbing. But in fact, what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious was that the collective unconscious appears to consist of mythological motifs or primordial images for which reason the myths of all nations are its real exponents. That's a direct quote.
Wow.
So it's not that it's all the information that's out there. That may be out there too, but that's not what he's referring to. He's referring to these mythological motifs and archetypes.
Right, archetypes, yep. See, that's where I've been, so we have the Akashic record, which is supposed to be a record of all that is, was, and ever will be. I mean, that seems pretty big, but it's kind of, when I think of Akashic record, I think of cosmic, celestial, all-inclusive database, information. When I think of the collective unconscious, and I don't even know what a definition was, but as you were talking about the mythological a component of it, that brings me back to the thought I just shared, in that if these archetypes are out there and they're almost a resonant frequency, I think science is figuring some of this stuff out. So there's a myriad of these archetypes or and story, and that's where I was wondering if on one level, doesn't have to be on all levels, but on one level, those who I think are trying to control our reality virtually, and I think that's why we have the technology now to literally do that, but I think those who've been playing with this game a lot longer than we realize have been projecting this virtual reality in which certain archetypes are introduced into the grid or the timeline, and we, depending on where we're at as a collective and individually, we respond to that that archetype, that archetypal presence. And there are those who do algorithms and, have very lucrative businesses on how people will respond to these sorts of things. And I think some of that is at play, but as some of that is at play in our reality, I do think that there are other levels of reality which want to just blow that wide open. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's really wild. I think we should probably take a quick break. No, actually, let's don't. Let's just go straight through to the half hour. And since we got a little bit of a late start, since we're on a roll. But, it reminded me of, our second topic of disclosure. And, I'm thinking, and, we talked about this earlier in the week too, about how, maybe there is going to be some big announcement. I don't see it happening that way. I see it leaking out, coming out, people with their own experiences, or if the ETs themselves, if they're here, making themselves widely known, maybe some big event, and I guess I kind of harken back a little bit to, some of the people that we've dealt with in the past 10 years or so who talk about this coming event. And I often wonder if it has something to do with an ET event, but no one would quite own up to it. But now it's sort of being more hinted at. So I'm thinking, also that dreams could basically inform us. Things can be disclosed to us in our dreams that we don't consciously comprehend. They can come to us in an unconscious way. So I'm wondering, how do you see disclosure happening?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. When I'll...
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Related to a specific event, which I called you afterwards because I felt that you would know more about the particular subject matter than I would, given your background in things like this. So specifically what I'm referring to is I happened to watch Ancient Aliens Season 12, Episode 9, I believe it was, and there was Giorgio, crazy-haired Giorgio. He's such a fun-loving guy. He was at Linda Moulton's house in Albuquerque, in New Mexico, and the episode was called The Majestic 12. And I had heard of Majestic 12, but I really didn't know the ins and outs of it. I just had a little snippet of an understanding. And in that, I found it amazing in that episode that Linda brought her years of experience to talk about the history of the Majestic 12, which was very helpful for me because I just didn't have all that backstory. I'm sure a lot of people do, but I didn't. And so when I was listening about Truman and the Roswell incident, as well as I do, that Roswell always I had very mixed feelings about it because I was born in Roswell, and it was always a joke growing up. My father was in the Air Force, and my brother and I were born on the military base, and, where were you born? Roswell. It's like the holy grail of UFO experiences. It just had that imprint on us, right, for some reason. And so I really shied away from that. So it talked about, Truman and how he encountered that and how he formed Majestic 12 to deal with it. Because you could imagine back then, if they weren't aware of this stuff, how in 1947, that was pretty freaky that they were all of a sudden dealing with, an alien craft, alien materials, and other beings from other worlds or dimensions, wherever they truly come from. And so then it carried it forward into Eisenhower. And, of course, I remember Eisenhower's famous, beware of the military-industrial complex. But they were saying things that I felt that on the History Channel, even 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know, maybe they would be said, but they actually showed documents, and they showed a particular document that was pulled out of a fire, and then it was a photocopy of it. And they had different people, verifying things along the way. But basically, they had a paper where the CIA was talking about how President Kennedy was making inquiries into aliens, ET, the secret space program, whatever exactly he was, and they had a code name for him, and they clearly did not want him interfering, and they're showing it on TV. And they're saying that, they want opinions of everybody in the group by October, and that was the year by November he was assassinated. So they make the assertion that it's highly likely or possible that led to his assassination. Now, I've studied the Kennedy assassination and all those pieces, and I just thought that this was kind of a leap forward in information on the History Channel. Not on the internet, not on certain YouTube videos, and perhaps other programming, but for that, which has a more mass audience, I just thought that was a big step forward. Is that disclosure? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Interestingly, talking about JFK and, possible ET information, there was a book, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it had Crypt something. Anyway, there was a private investigator, very well known here in LA. His name was Milo Spiriglio. And Crypt 33, that was the name of it. 33, that's kind of an interesting number too. But anyway, it was about the death of Marilyn Monroe. Mm-hmm. And basically, he claimed, and he had copies of documents, redacted documents and some not redacted, about that she was getting ready to have a press conference and she was going to spill the beans on the Kennedys and ETs. It said something about ETs. Now, this has been years ago, but I did a show when I was at UFO Magazine. I did a radio show for 5 years called UFOs Tonight with Don Ecker, who was the research director for UFO Magazine, and Dwight Schultz, the actor from Star Trek Next Generation and the A-Team. And we interviewed Milo Spiriglio and had him on a couple times, I think, and then I got in touch with him much later for a television program. But that was what his book was about. So it kind of dovetails a little bit with what you're saying. Now, I'm not saying that's a confirmation that that's all true, but it is kind of interesting that allegation is that Kennedy was killed because he was going to talk about ET or get involved, or was getting too close, and then this guy saying Marilyn Monroe was killed for the same reason. So because she was going to go public, she was going to have a press conference because she had really been done dirty by the Kennedy brothers. Well, Dr. Stephen Greer says the same thing, and he even, and I have it in my notes somewhere. When I took a 4-hour webinar from him and delved into his information, but he says the same thing, that the CIA killed Marilyn Monroe, and he actually offers the specific name of the person in the CIA, and he says that in his archive of information and documents and so forth, that they have an audio cassette, whatever the technology was at that time, of JFK actually weeping in the Oval Office, because all of this is like he's coming into realization of what happened to Marilyn Monroe. She was now dead. There was this, secret space program, shadow government, ET presence, and
he was absolutely overwhelmed by that. Now, in this Ancient Alien episode, series, season 12, episode 9, there's a guy that comes forward, and I think his name is Douglas Caddy, and he was friends with E. Howard Hunt. And he says E. Howard Hunt, who some of you may know was a person that some believe was part of the boxcar bombs on the grassy knoll area in the JFK assassination, and he was CIA, and he got in trouble later on, and he was going to be going to jail. So I believe it was Douglas Caddy. He called in and said, "Hey, let's go out to dinner," and they did. And when they were on the street, getting ready to part ways, he leaned in and asked E. Howard Hunt, what, who killed, or, what happened to JFK? And basically his response was the aliens, and that JFK was going to share it with the Russians.
Now, why would he do that?
I don't know, but, some of this stuff where we're shown a Cold War and we're shown, whatever we're shown in the media isn't always necessarily what's going on. And there's a lot of documentation out there that actually these governments were working together on a secret space program, if you will. So they already did have some knowledge, and perhaps he was looking for an ally in that regard. I don't know. I'm only assuming. They don't go into it. It's not my area of strength, so I don't have a lot of research to provide. But that was his honest. That was what he says that E. Howard Hunt claimed to be, and then he walked off into the night like a Hollywood movie, and this guy never saw him again. But when we're talking about disclosure, it's I think for me, because you asked me what is it for me, it's like you hear all these pieces over and over again, and some turn out to be true, some turn out to be false, and you begin to piece together what you think or feel is truth. And then all of a sudden, one day, like the light bulb goes off, and all the pieces, or most of the pieces, fall into place. And maybe for a lot of us on a collective level, we're hitting that point. We're reaching that level.
It may be. I mean, it seems like, truth is being exposed here, there, everywhere. Historical truths, archaeological truths. It seems like the Earth is just a big, giant time capsule, and things are just popping out of it all the time. We're learning more and more and more at a very, very rapid pace. And I guess that ties in with what you're saying, is at some point, it's just going to be, okay, this is it.
Well, yeah, I mean, even think about it 5 and 10 years ago, forget 20 and 30 years ago. If you talked about ETs or aliens or star beings or whatever phrases you put to these species of entities, or I don't even know what to call them, that maybe humanoid, maybe not, I'm not really sure, people would have laughed you out of the room in general. And yet I know for me in my own personal experience that my dad was a huge Star Trek fan. He just thought it was unbelievable, and it wasn't until he retired from the Air Force that he began to put the pieces together, because his awareness had come to that point, and he was seeing more and more of it, that there really was something that went on in Roswell, and that he actually had a direct experience with Colonel Blanchard, who was involved in that, and perhaps the cover-up, and unwittingly, he didn't even know it. And I watched him come into that understanding, and he was very open with me. We didn't talk about it with other family members, but it was a personal connection, because my brother and I were born there, and he spent so many years there, that we began to put the pieces together. So, I think disclosure happens on a bigger scale when more and more people begin to make sense of things, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that's really what I think happened. And no, we don't think you're crazy if you think of aliens and star beings and UFOs and all that, because a lot of people now, last survey I saw, was a ridiculous amount of the world population that believes in this stuff.
Absolutely. And, which it sort of falls into the category of, psychic abilities and all that. It's like people kind of have a weird thought about it. They think it's all kind of strange or woo-woo. And again, I'm going to go back to Carl Jung, what he said about psychic abilities. He said, I would not assert the law behind them is supernatural, but merely something which we cannot get at yet with our present knowledge. And I so agree with that. I so agree with
me
that.
Too. Me too. I was
Anytime-
reading articles today about DNA and what science is finding out about DNA that even 5 years ago, if I mentioned them to people, they would have said I was crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's like, it's sort of, there are some people that have, obvious abilities like yourself and others who actually, do readings for people professionally and that sort of thing. And then there are people like me who, I just kind of follow my intuition, and I never really realized even that I was doing it. It sort of started really becoming apparent to me in the 90s when we really started using the internet. And I remember it was mid-90s, and I was working on a television show called Strange Universe. I had just left the magazine, got my first TV job, and was trying to act like I knew what I was doing. And also, the internet was really kind of new. And I remember our search engine at the time, the big search engine was Metacrawler. And I remember when I started using Metacrawler and looking stuff up, I started realizing that there was like some kind of psychic thing going on between me and the computer. And I could almost search for something with my eyes closed and then open my eyes and there it would be, or it would be a thing that was even better than what I was looking for. But I felt a real connection with, not really necessarily with the computer, but kind of going through the computer and connection directly with the information. And so I think that, it's like, and it wasn't something I really had ever really thought about, but it just seemed to always happen. And I thought, ooh, lucky, I'm lucky stroke, And then I thought, well, it can't be luck if it happens every single time,
Right.
So I think that a lot of us walk around using our intuition, and because it is a natural thing, and it's not a spooky thing, and it's probably a very scientific thing, that we don't even regard it, but we've all got it going on. And it's just a matter of recognizing it and using it for the best advantage and for the highest purpose that we have. But it's just so interesting how, we have things that now that, obviously technology that people, 100 years ago would have thought was some kind of magic, mm-hmm. and 100 years from now, we're going to look at what we're doing now that we think is so state of the art, and it's going to look very primitive, and there's going to be so much more going on. It's really well. We're going to have to take a break, and when we come back, I'm really excited to get to the last part of the show, which is going to be destiny. Destiny for ourselves as humans, what it means to be human, and what it is that the ETs might be interested in about us.
I have to say this, Renee, before we go to break. You just said something that is very much a part of the channeling that I did earlier this evening. Got very quiet and connected with the spirit I know as Mary Magdalene, and that's really what her message is about. So I think on an intuitive level, you're already picking that up.
Oh, wow. I can't wait. MJ, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back. We're back with Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, Renee Barnett. If you're just joining us, we've got author and intuitive Gloria Amendola. She's returning to visit us once again, and we are doing 3D radio here on Night Vision because we have been talking about dreams, disclosure, and now we're ready for destiny. We're talking about our destiny. Where are we going? And who are we? What does it mean to be human? And what might it be if we're indeed being visited, being manipulated in physically, mentally, or otherwise, spiritually, psychologically, by ETs? What could it be about us that they find so interesting? So, Gloria, what do you got to say on that?
Well, in terms of the whole idea of aliens and what is the purpose of all of this, I really am still formulating possibilities in my mind about what is really going on. And one of the things we were talking about the other night when this came up, I said to you, what if they're really not all that powerful, or perhaps powerful? Maybe their power is more concentrated in different environments, a different biosphere. But maybe on planet Earth, where things are a bit denser, maybe they're not as powerful of beings as they are in other places. And I said, what if they're really like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, projecting this almighty presence and this idea that we see in Hollywood movies? But what if, in fact, they're really not? I don't know. I don't know what the agenda is. I think there's multiple possibilities, and there's multiple species who have different, just like in life, there's a lot of different people on the planet. We're a very diverse bunch, and a lot of people have different ideas of what they want out of life. So I think that it's not all sinister, and but I think some of it's dark. I think some of it is very much to liberate us into more fuller understanding of who we are and what our capabilities are. So that's about as far as I think I've gotten on destiny in that regard. But I think the destiny is about the human body and what we're capable of.
Well, a couple weeks back, maybe 3 weeks or so ago, we had on Dr. Chris Hardy from France. I know you're familiar with her work. And
I love it.
Yeah, and she was talking about that. I mean, her theory was that we did have certain abilities that they lacked. And what the main thing I think she was talking about was sort of psychic abilities. And that maybe they were trying to sort of control us out of that. And then, that sort of got done by other agencies and organizations along the way, because, it was demonized. It was, made to be either crazy or evil. So it could be that, because I was saying, if they're among us, if they're here, then why aren't they making themselves known? Well, another reason for that could be, or one reason for that could be, is that maybe they aren't so all powerful, and maybe they do have vulnerabilities. We always think of them as, all powerful because, they're able to get here. Well, maybe technologically they're very, very advanced, but maybe not physically, or maybe even not psychologically or spiritually. And
that would align with Dr. Hardy's take on the Anunnaki in her book, DNA of the Gods, because she's very clear in her book about how Enlil and his group and his gang are really very impulsive, and although they had powerful and advanced technologies, and she names certain apparatus in her book, she names 5 things very specifically, but she says, like, on an emotional level, really lacking in the wisdom department, not high on the list, being more impulsive. So that supports that idea, or for her, I'm sure she's taken it from certain sources that she's worked with. So I don't know, that's out there too.
It's interesting to look at it, from the other side of the coin. It's like we've always kind of thought of ourselves as being the vulnerable ones, sort of being, victimized or possible victims of these powers, coming from space and all that. But maybe it's really not that way. Maybe they do have certain, again, technology and abilities in that realm that we have not achieved yet. But certainly we're getting there by leaps and bounds. But, maybe they're physically not as strong, and maybe that's why they come in the night, when people talk about having all these alien abduction experiences, or that's why they make people unconscious, because they really could be overtaken by a human being. Don't know.
Well, you would think by their physical stature that would be true. I don't know. I mean, for some reason, when you were talking about that, I remembered in Tom Kenyon's Arcturian anthology, he's actually in the Rennes le Chateau area when he has an encounter with what he says is an Arcturian, and it's at Les Labadous, which is below the Elizabeth Van Buren Plateau in Rennes le Chateau. It's in a field there, and he's, hiking all around the area, and this information begins to come to him. And, of course, Mount Bugarash is part of this whole experience that he has. So with that, that part of it is really interesting. But one of the things the Arcturians tell him, and I consider Tom a pretty strong channel, they say that they're here to protect us. So perhaps, in this variety of species that's in the galaxy, if you will, there's a real cast of characters. But it seems like those guardians of our space, our airspace, if you will, according to Tom's book, are the Arcturians. Well, that's good, because maybe we have guardians and we have help towards intense technologies. But I think when it comes to the Greys, I don't think they're as powerful a species, and I think this idea of projecting virtual realities to have us believe certain things, I feel that really has been done to us, and it's been done. Maybe they understand the dream time more, I don't know, but I think we're coming to a point where we're beginning to realize more, especially with science being so succinct now, that the biology and energy fields of the human being are extraordinarily powerful.
Wow. I know you have something special for us, and I don't want to get too far down into the final half hour here before we get that information, and then we have a chance to talk about it a little bit. But before we do that, I did want to throw a question for your consideration from the chat room from DARPA. She asks, do you think that we all have a connection and just most of us are not in tune to it? And I asked her back, to each other, and she said to the aliens. And it's a compound question. Abductees, do you think they were selected before birth? Okay, so there's two questions. Do you feel a connection to ETs? Do you think we all have a connection? I haven't figured that out yet, to tell you the truth.
Well, for me, because I do intuitive and mediumship, or I'm in constant contact through circles and with individuals and groups and events, one thing we do is we like to call them star beings. It has a little different feel, and we've learned and we've applied techniques over the course of years. I have one group where we've been doing this for 10 years, and we use sound through drums and Tibetan bowls and so on and so forth. And the DNA articles that I was reading talk about how sound is this intense conduit and especially genetically. So I think that we all have the ability, if we practice, it's just like anything else, just practicing, to connect with many levels of beings, because they're all holding different frequencies, if you will. And I think we all have that ability. It's just going through some training, some study, and practice to be able to connect in. But I think it's our birthright. I think it's who we are, that we come from the stars, so we should be able to connect with people who are from other places, beings.
Sure.
Don't you think?
It's sure looking that way, I tell you. And to your second question, DARPA, about abductees. Do you think that they were selected before birth? I guess what I would say to that is, in my work, talking to many, many, many people who felt that they had that experience, in many, many cases, their parents had an experience, their siblings had experience, or even their grandparents had told them stories. So it seems to be a generational thing. If that's indeed the case, I would say yes. It could look that way. That a grandparent has an experience, and then they have a child, and that child has the experience, and then they have a child, and they have an experience as well, or a continued experience. Obviously that was something that was going on before they were born. So I guess the answer to that would be yeah, that could be true. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I agree with that, and I also think that there's been an agreement, and it's definitely based on the Majestic 12 documents, but also in my own, what's in my bones, how I feel personally, is that I do think that there's been an agreement with our government and these other species, these other, peoples or humanoids, whatever they are, to do some experimenting. I mean, hell, our government does it on us anyway. So there has been experimentation done, and in the documents that were shown on Ancient Aliens, it said that they would basically meet at military installations by mutual agreement. So that was an environment they could control. And I do believe in exchange for technology, certain alien species wanted to perhaps experiment on us. Maybe they wanted to jumpstart an evolutionary process. I don't know. I mean, Dr. Hardy talks about that from the Anunnaki perspective, and Enki and Ninma and so on and so forth. So that idea isn't new, and I think some of that has been going on. And I think children of those GIs or enlisted men have been watched through the generations as well. So that's another aspect of it that I've really coming to accept.
Very wild. Now we want our surprise. So what did you do for us? What did you do?
Well, I got quiet, and I connected in with the spirit that I know is Mary Magdalene. And I asked if there was a message for the listening audience, especially for this destiny part, as we go through this very intense energy portal time that we're experiencing right now on so many levels. And it's not a really long message, but it really ties in to what we've been talking about. So here it goes. So I asked her, and so this is Mary Magdalene now speaking through me, and I'm recording or scribing the message. You want to know what all of this chaos and craziness in your world means at this time? Did you not think that this would happen, given all the factors in play? Look at your world.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
World, it is struggling to move beyond the old models of ruling societies. Your America was a great experiment in what could be in this world. Did you not think the dark forces, especially the ones that lay dormant inside of you, would not show themselves as they near their point of extinction? You must hold tight as this doorway opens. You know I've called it the eye of the needle. Many are not choosing to move through this opening. It's just too hard, given their past choices. They do not see hope nor a way forward. They see doom and gloom. But I tell you, with all my heart, that there are wondrous moments unfolding in your world. So many things are coming alive as others are falling away. And yes, you worry about artificial intelligence, and there are concerns to be had. But the deeper truth is that your emotions are creating your reality, and that is the X factor human beings hold in their hands. Worlds are created from emotions. So what will you choose? Fear, hatred, division, separation? Or will you choose love, generosity, wisdom, compassion? The choice is yours. Your elders are there to assist you, as are the star beings. Call in the assistance you need day by day. Stay centered in your heart and prepare for the leap time, for it is upon you.
Wow. That just came today?
That came this evening. I came home and I needed to clear out my head, so I took a 20-minute nap, and I got up from that and I felt refreshed, and then I tapped in and asked, and that's what came.
Huh. And she mentioned the eye of a needle. It reminds me of that scripture. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And that was supposedly a quote from Jesus in Matthew. Yeah. And It's funny that that term came through again. And it sounded like you said that she said that she'd used that term before.
Yes, in my book, she talks about where we are in terms of the place of reconciliation in the eye of the needle. Yeah, but what I thought was remarkable about it was this phrase of ruling societies. It is look at your world. It is struggling to move beyond the old models of ruling societies. I just thought that was pretty unique. I've never heard her say that. But what really brought this home to me is that she was reminding us that our power is worlds are created from our emotions. And it was really specifically human emotion, how powerful it really is.
And do you think she was meaning that we manifest what emotions we're bringing up? Or was she talking about that, we need to, well, I guess it could be both, that we have the power to change things or to make things what we want them to be rather than the chaos that they are?
Well, I think she's saying that we need to remember how powerful worlds are created from emotions, and how powerful we are that we can interject that into the grids or into the world. So we must, we must be mindful of what we choose, what will be our choice. And that's why initiation has always been a tried and true method of mastery, because we don't want to eliminate our emotions, but we don't want to be enslaved by them. We want to master them. So that's where she says, so what will you choose? Fear, hatred, division, separation, or will you choose love, generosity, wisdom, compassion? She's saying we all have these choices. And when she was talking about people that are really opting out right now, that are leaving the planet, she's saying one of the reasons they're doing is just too hard given their past choices. Like they just can't turn it around that quickly at this for certain people, and others are choosing, love, compassion, generosity, wisdom, and it's taking them in a different world and in a different direction. But she says, prepare for the leap time, for it is upon us.
That's really interesting. Obviously, they don't, there's not a phrase called growing pains for nothing, so maybe all of this chaos and division that we're going through is just a highlight and a sort of showcasing those things for us so that we see them and we can do something about it. We can make a choice to do something about it. We can make a choice to make it different. Mm-hmm. And I think, in past
channelings that Magdalene has given me in October of last year, she said to not fear the different choices that people are making, as extreme as they might seem, because the tension of opposites would be one of the catalysts that moved us into this leap time. It's like pulling on that rubber band so hard that at some point it's just going to snap and break because of the tension. And that somehow that was just a necessary catalyst in this alchemical solution, this alchemical experience we find ourselves in. But I like the idea of remembering how powerful my emotions are. That really gives me hope. That gives me a sense of empowerment. Like if that's what I've come to learn and do the work I've done to become conscious and, clear out the dross and the mess and the craziness as best I can, then I can use my emotions as a great artist, as a co-creator, and make this world more of what I wish it to be.
Yeah, and I guess there's no reason we couldn't all do that.
Oh, absolutely. And then I think that gets back to the collective again, and what science is showing us in terms of when people get together and they're putting forth compassion as a feeling, as a very strong feeling, what that can do and what that can affect in their world. Greg Braden reports some of this research, but it's not really his. It's others that he draws from. And, it's just building up now to more and more and more. So I think she's saying, hey, we have a choice. And what are we going to choose? Because we do have a choice at this time. That's part of the destiny.
It is true. We really are powerful, much more powerful than I think people really consciously perceive. But we can affect, everything that's in our little scope here, in our own little personal universe. People's emotions can have an actual physical effect on them and on others, both good and bad, positive and negative.
Right, depending on what we choose.
Depending on what we are transmitting, what we're putting out for others to pick up on. And maybe we are reaching some sort of critical mass where that will become the norm rather than the exception in this world. But we all know people that, and I've said this so many times, where, a person can walk into the room and it's just like a burst of sunshine. You can feel the good energy and the happiness, and they make you smile. And by the same token, we know when we all know people that they walk into the room, it feels like they just sucked all the air out of the room because of their negativity. They're complaining, they're criticizing others, they're being hateful. It's amazing. And I don't think that generally people give enough credence to how we affect all that is around us. And if we're affecting people, we're probably affecting animals, we're probably affecting plants, we're probably affecting every single thing.
Yeah, some of the research that I was just reading really supports that. It's wonderful, the research. I don't have it committed to memory. And I will tell you something else that I just took in this weekend. I was listening to a webinar of this gentleman who's teaching this course, and it was a free webinar, and it was about the plants, because I'm into plant-based medicine as opposed to pharma, if I can make that transition. So I keep going deeper into that. And one of the fascinating things he said, and he was studied in all traditions, is that the plants have created a biosphere on the earth for informing us of the higher intelligence, because nature is very harmonious, right? It's very mathematical, it's very harmonious. And he talked about how it's actually been informing consciousness for a very long time, and I had never seen it that way. I understood spirit of the plant, but not that there was this collective consciousness of even the plant kingdom and how everything is all connected and how everything does affect everything else.
Wow. Before we get too far down the pike here, I want to remind everybody that you can find Gloria at gloriaamendola.com. She does readings. She does them remotely as well as in person for those that are in her area there in New England. And you can see what she has coming up. You can see if she's got some tours coming up, and just connect with her that way easily. Also on Facebook, you can find Gloria as you can me. But, and links to her books are also on her site, or you can find them on Amazon.com, or just Google them and you'll find them. Also wanted to say a little something. Timothy Beckley just put out a new book called Hidden Treasures of the Knights Templar, Secrets of Rennes le Chateau, Rosslyn Chapel, Oak Island, and the Masonic Order. And I am listed as a co-author on the book. I actually only wrote a chapter. And of course, it was on Rennes le Chateau. But just wanted to mention that and give him and myself maybe a little bit of a plug. But also be sure and look up Gloria's books. And I highly recommend her series on the channel work on Mary Magdalene. I mean, my goodness, they are amazing. And I've been watching or reading Gloria's channelings and hearing about them for a long, long time. We got the music rolling. But they are amazing. I would suggest, and they do have the ring of truth to them, so I would suggest you get that book or get those books and go to gloriaamendola.com. Thank you, Gloria. Thanks, everybody. We love you all.
Thank you, Renee.
We love you all left, right, or center.